Today, we're going to share with you our expert views on best practices for security and availability monitoring across hybrid IT and multi-cloud with the Splunk platform. As we head into 2021, two things come to mind. Firstly, business, government and society continue to adapt to the unprecedented disruption to the way we work and the way we work, from what has unfortunately become a prolonged pandemic era. Last year, we observed a dramatic and accelerated shift to remote working and cloud hybrid IT services, and this really proved that many businesses can adapt and transform much faster than we could have imagined possible or planned for in such a short time. Simply put, technology has enabled us. But the other critical theme is that cybersecurity threats, the accelerating concerns and impact has increased at scales that are at times overwhelming. Many
so quickly and easily
the challenge only grows, because the opportunity for malicious threat actors with multiple and diverse agendas is continually realised. Now more than ever, we need to future-proof business continuity and cyber resilience through better use of the technology available to us. We're excited and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here, so let's get started. First, some introductions. My name is Mark Trumbull. I'm the General Manager for our cybersecurity go-to-market here at NTT Australia and New Zealand. I'm responsible for managing NTT's security partner alliances, which is a key foundation for our wider go-to-markets, platforms and services. And joining me today are our subject matter experts, James Young from Splunk and Vijay Chakravarthy from NTT. Our esteemed colleagues are going to unpack and discuss the key considerations for our topic today. And as we start, I'll just mention some points for housekeeping.
As the landscape changes.
We will be recording this webinar. Only the content in our presenters will be recorded. And during the presentation, you're welcome to submit questions via the Q&A interface, and we'll reserve some time later to respond to your questions before we close. And please also take the time to complete the survey when prompted during or at the end of the session. So a little bit about our joint partnership. NTT and Splunk have been working together in the ANZ region for almost a decade. And together we deliver customer success outcomes across many industries, including government, financial services, healthcare, education, transport, resources and critical infrastructure. Splunk is also a key platform that underpins our managed security services capability, which we will share some more detail on later. In 2020, I'm proud to say that NTT was recognised as the Global Alliance Partner of the Year, and I can confidently say that the innovative and scale solutions that our Australian clients, the Splunk and NTT teams have delivered in this region were significant for this global recognition and award. As NTT, we're heavily invested in our Splunk services capability with over 200 accredited staff and almost 600 Splunk accreditations held across the global organisation. Our skills and experience are held across multiple expertise domains, and we consult, architect, deploy, support, innovate and operate Splunk solutions across security, IT ops and business analytics solutions and platforms. We're prioritised on helping our clients develop and implement use cases, apps and dashboards that help organisations accelerate their business opportunity and business resilience, both for the platform itself, but also the integrated ecosystems that we need to operate in. So let's look briefly at the wider context of the challenges we need to resolve. The convergence of distributed environments is bringing diverse technology platforms into a connected ecosystem that has to support both legacy and new application and e-commerce models. These extend and interconnect across software-defined perimeter, mobility, 5G and IoT, all manner of logical and physical connected platforms. And the number of tools and use cases for technology across these is growing exponentially. The logical workplace for users and consumers in our expanding information stores has moved from static to dynamic platforms and complex supply chains. Organisations have a reliance on networks, externally hosted applications and devolving data centres that are no longer on-premise and often not in our span of control. So it can be really hard to find the balance of establishing trust and accountability for your extended technology stacks that you run your business on. And to secure these, multiple point products have been the solution. And these sort of create risks and exposure gaps that are difficult to effectively protect and optimize. Enterprises now need to secure a much broader and more vulnerable attack surface that threat actors will seek to access, compromise and exploit in pursuit of information that can be sold to financial gain, to cause business disruption or worse, geopolitical compromise and economic instability. So the technology ecosystem we need to protect and manage requires continuous assessment, adaptive controls, singular visibility and trusted partnerships to optimize our cyber risk posture. Leaders must also consider cost, efficiency and productivity gains which can further limit your ability to secure the expanding, diverse enterprise. And while protecting our users and applications, we need to also ensure uptime, availability and performance. If we deploy too many controls laden with complexity and dependencies, we're going to degrade our ability to identify and respond to threats and incidents promptly. And that's going to impede and degrade the end user experience. It might fail to meet partner and customer service level agreements, or worse, fail to stop a breach or an attack that could stop our business from operating. And we understand this at NTT and Splunk, where we've been addressing the constantly changing cyber threat landscape and helping our clients to architect and protect their information assets for many years and as many technology evolutions. On that note, I'd now like to hand over to James and then Vijay to unpack these challenges and how to treat these in more detail. Over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Mark. So I guess maybe as a picture of the assets as part of my job at Splunk in the Security and Strategy Solutions Group, I get to talk to a really broad range of customers, and a lot of what we're talking to customers about at the moment is how we can help them with a number of different sort of security modernization initiatives. So these are sort of a broad range of different areas that customers are focusing on or sort of almost being forced to focus on given the sort of changing landscape. So I guess at a start point, one of the main areas we're sort of talking to organizations around is how we can help them from a security perspective with the various initiatives around transformation. So as the business is looking to sort of move out and adopt more cloud type services, transform the way that they're sort of performing their traditional business functions, what do we need to consider from a security perspective? And then we sort of move on to aspects where the move to remote work is further impounding or compacting those changes as well. So, and nothing more like the sort of current sort of massive rapid shift as a result of the pandemic that Mark has already mentioned. In addition to that, sort of the need of being able to support choice when it comes to supporting our users with the types of devices that they're using to obviously access the resources and the flexibility they have in terms of mobility and where they can access resources from. And then we overlay that obviously with the threats, and we don't really need to think too hard about, I guess, the impact of threats and the types of threats that we're dealing with, given some of the recent news that we've seen in that space. And I think the real sort of message here in terms of what I get to see when I'm talking to customers are these are all of the things that security operations teams really want to be doing more with, but there's quite a lot that's really sort of meaning that they're stuck dealing with the sort of traditional challenges they've had from a security operations perspective that really has meant that they've not been able to focus on supporting the business with these types of objectives or initiatives as much as they would have liked. And the other part of this as well too is that these initiatives have further meant that in many cases the security operations teams are getting left behind and they don't necessarily get the visibility around new cloud services perhaps or rapid changes in the way that users are being supported in terms of remote work or the types of devices that they're using. And that further sort of impacts our ability to keep up and track the types of threats that we need to and get the visibility around the types of threats that we're seeing emerging or coming up all the time. And when we really drill back into the reasons as to why the security operations teams are somewhat struggling in that regard, we really sort of get to see that they're typically overwhelmed. So quite often when we're speaking to SOC teams, we get to see that the security analysts that are working in those teams really struggle to keep up with the volume of alerts that they're faced with. And we've spent a lot of time working through the process, understanding the reasons why we're in this situation, and also looking at sort of the impact as a result of what is happening with SOC teams being overwhelmed. So we're seeing quite often that analysts don't get to focus on the right kinds of alerts first. We're either missing the important alerts from the noise. They're in situations where, due to the high rate of false positives, we're having to suppress a range of alerts. It takes much longer to investigate and respond to these types of security incidents, particularly the important ones. We have insufficient visibility around the different kinds of data sources in environments. So when we think about cloud transformation and the adoption of these different kinds of SaaS services, we don't necessarily get the visibility fast enough to ensure we're able to detect threats that may start in those particular environments. And then obviously we worry about the impact that has on our analysts, so further compounding the problem. So really, I guess all of this is meaning that security teams are really struggling to get a foothold and really uplift or improve or keep up with the changes that we're seeing organizations need to make from a security perspective. So we spend a lot of time really not so much firstly looking at what the technology needs to do, but looking more at the methodology and the approach that we need to take in order to build out more effective security alerting from a SOC perspective. And that's probably where I wanted to start, sort of talking in a little bit of detail around the types of things that we're doing with our customers to try and solve some of these problems. As much as I'd love to go straight into talking about a technology-based approach, I think it first needs to start with our process or our methodology around what we need to do to build out an approach that's going to enable us to have more effective security alerting. And really, this is where over probably the last 4 or 5 years, quite a number of people in the group that I work in have been working with a number of large customers across the globe to come up with this approach we've called risk-based alerting. So this is really maybe changing the way that we've looked at building out our security detection approach with Splunk and Splunk Enterprise Security to use, if you like, more of a dual layer approach. So if we think of the traditional way that we're generating security alerts, we're very much looking at a singular approach where we generate a security alert that goes in the incident queue where there's one thing that happens that we think potentially could be an issue. With this approach with risk-based alerting, what we're doing is rather than generating an alert where we see something happening every single time that could potentially be an alert, but more often than not is not really a legitimate security alert, we generate a record of that and put that into what we call a risk index. So at this point, there's no security alert we've generated. We've just kept a record, if you like, of this observation of something that potentially could be indicative of something that is inappropriate, malicious, suspicious, or whatever it may be. And then from there, we work over the top of this risk index that keeps a record of all of these things based upon the assets and the identities that we would like to protect, to start to look across, if you like, the cyber kill chain, or start to look across, say, things like the different MITRE attack tactics that could be indicative of maybe an attacker or an internal user or insider threat type behavior showing progression of that particular threat. And at the same time, we also keep a dynamic risk score of all of the different things that we've observed have happened to try and track and identify risky behavior associated with the assets or identities that are involved that we may be trying to protect. So if we think about things from a MITRE attack tactic perspective, starting out looking at the very, very early stage tactics, which could be in relation to sort of performing reconnaissance or establishing that initial foothold, or potentially moving through to some kind of privilege escalation, or potentially moving further down to the ultimate objective of maybe something like exfiltration. What we want to do is look for a number of indications of these things happening, so that when we see multiple, say maybe 2, 3 or more of these things occurring that either fit within one tactic phase, so we might see a number of different techniques being used for reconnaissance, or we may see progression where we're seeing techniques being used that span multiple MITRE attack tactic phases, then we want to generate the alert. So that way we're generating an alert that has a range of different indications, increasing the likelihood that something suspicious or malicious is going on. And this also enables us to look for outliers in terms of the types of behaviours from an overall risk profile or trending in terms of individual tactics that we're seeing or observing within the environment, and the different kinds of tactics that we're seeing across the environment as well. So really what we're doing is we're ending up with a security alert that consists of multiple different kinds of indications automatically already grouped together, which has a number of different benefits that I'll sort of step through in the examples now and just drill into a little bit more detail around. So really designed to say, let's have a look at what is going on and use multiple indications in order to generate our security alert, rather than that singular approach, which results in generally much, much higher fidelity alerts. So really, what does this look like in practice? So if we tape a sequence of events and have a look at these traditionally in isolation could be very, very, very noisy security alerts. So something that could be indicative of some kind of phishing attack. So maybe some kind of suspicious email that has some unusual URLs in it, or maybe some kind of zero-day type malware associated as part of a PDF that's been sent in. those things, we started to generate alerts for every time something looked a little bit suspicious, we're going to end up with a broad range of alerts that are more often than not going to be a false positive. But if we take a look at the affected asset or the affected identity and start to look for what is coming next, so if we see after this particular point, something that could be indicative of maybe some kind of command and control or some suspicious PowerShell activity, or maybe some kind of privilege escalation or lateral movement, and we keep a record of all of these things as they've occurred based upon the impacted assets identities, or maybe the privilege escalation where we're seeing progression through to a different identity, if we track all of these things that have happened, we can actually generate a single alert that takes all of these things into consideration, associates them automatically together so an analyst doesn't have to manually go through the process to build out and identify these associations. So we've saved time in that regard, but we've also generated an alert based upon maybe what our own personal or organisational thresholds need to be in terms of how many indications we might want to look for, or what the overall risk score would need to be based upon the kinds of alerts that are made up with this overall sort of end-to-end approach. So we end up with a much, much higher fidelity alert because there's multiple, so 2 or more indications of something suspicious going on. And we're able to build, if you like, more modular targeted type detections that by themselves could be noisier, but when we group them together in this way by using a 2-layer mechanism or 2 layers of analytics to generate our security alerts, we generally end up with much, much higher fidelity alerts. And the other flip side of that is we end up with an overall lower volume of alerts. And we've seen some really good examples of this in practice with our customers, where this has made a huge difference in terms of the overall volume of alerts that are ending up in the incident sort of response queue. And the remaining alerts are generally of a much, much higher quality. So significant benefits from that regard. And so I think the idea of shifting the approach when it comes to to build out more advanced analytics that we have is going to effectively give us more resources to go back and focus on some of these other factors that are driving modernization. And also, when we think about the way that we need to look at attack detection across sort of these complex hybrid cloud environments that we're dealing with, we need to be able to look across a range of different data sources from a range of different locations to really get an idea of where all of these things are coming from and what the attackers will do once they get in that initial foothold and they start to move throughout the environment. And that's another thing that we're seeing that's sort of really potentially compounding the visibility that we're seeing, or impacting the visibility that we're seeing, is really around an increasing sort of situation where we're seeing further silification. I'm going to make up a word there around further silification of data, where customers are starting to choose to leave data in different places. So leave it in their cloud environment, or leave it in their localized environments, maybe on-prem or wherever it is, and then only centralize alerts. That still applies to this approach, but more often than not, we still need to be able to centralize all of our data to build out these better quality analytics and build out these linkages between sort of the assets and identities in terms of how it relates to escalation of a potential attack. But at the same time, when we need to go through and investigate this, we want easy access to that raw data as well. So the idea of actually still having a centralized approach to some level of data in order to build out our better detections, but also to streamline that investigative process where we need to go down and actually look at the raw data to determine what happened is a critical sort of requirement of this kind of approach. So, as I sort of pointed out a couple of times throughout what I've just talked about, we're really seeing RBA have tremendous impacts, and we have a range of different examples from our customers who've spoken at some of our global user conferences talking about how successful this approach has been. And we've seen tremendous sort of reduction in the overall volume of alerts. We've seen obviously the quality of the detections we're ending up with have been significantly improved. And at the same time, this is giving SOC teams the ability to improve their overall maturity in not only the types of analytics and the types of detections they are doing, but then start to focus on some other things that can improve or support the broader sort of security modernization requirements. Because the biggest challenge, I guess, at the end of the day, we're all faced with is the amount of time that we have and the amount of resources we have to be able to do the things that we need to do to improve what we're doing. So if we can free up resources by building better quality security detection, so we only have to really look at legitimate security alerts, that's going to give us time to focus on more value-added functions as well. And then there's always the opportunity to I guess, reduce the overall operational costs that we might be dealing with as well. So I really wanted to sort of peel it right back and try and understand what some of the common challenges are, or the main common challenges that we see organisations are faced with, that are preventing our SOC teams that we speak to in terms of their ability to go and support the broader initiatives around security modernisation, and also to take advantage of some of these initiatives that organisations are going through to improve their overall sort of SOC capabilities as well. So at some point, I guess we've spent a lot of time working on this methodology, and what we've found is the technology itself has been updated and improved, and new functions and features are being introduced to some of the Splunk security solutions that we have to better support this kind of approach. And probably the main one that I'll spend time to talk about just quickly now is some of the recent changes that we've introduced in Splunk Enterprise Security, which is really the central piece to the Splunk Security Operations suite of products that we have. So there's been a number of changes with the most recent release of Splunk Enterprise Security. They're designed to make it easier for our customers to implement an approach like risk-based alerting. And probably the number one thing that we've done is to make it much, much easier for customers to integrate and align with the MITRE ATT&CK framework for risk-based alerting. So where we looked at what we were doing in terms of building out our different detections that are aligned with different sort of stages or tactic phases from MITRE ATT&CK, make it easier for you to build out your own approach to getting coverage across the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and have that fully aligned with the way that we build detections inside enterprise security. And sort of quickly on that note, if you haven't seen Splunk Security Essentials, which I'll talk about in a little while, Splunk Security Essentials is again becoming increasingly important and increasingly useful when we want to go and take that approach. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that shortly after. And the content we have in Splunk Security Essentials is really designed to support you and provide a whole range of out-of-the-box examples of the types of use cases you would want to build out, or the types of detections you would want to build out to support this approach. The other part of the big changes that we've sort of introduced more recently with enterprise security, and this has been something that's been happening over a broad range of time as well too. So there's been quite a number of different things we've done to better support cloud data sources, to make it easy to bring cloud data sources into Splunk, providing a whole range of new, I guess, out-of-the-box use cases to support cloud detection scenarios, cloud compliance monitoring scenarios as well. So being able to have an overarching approach over your hybrid or multi-cloud sort of architectures, where you're able to implement one use case that's going to work across those different environments, has been something that we've been working on in parallel with each of the different Splunk Enterprise Security releases. And the biggest sort of addition with the most recent version is this idea of the ability to quickly and easily ingest and dynamically update over time as the landscape changes, a picture of all of the different assets you have from a cloud perspective. So probably more focused on the infrastructure as a service or platform as a service type approach. But key to what we do with risk-based alerting and everything from an enterprise security perspective has been around focusing on what we're trying to protect, so the asset and the identity. So making it much easier for you to get a picture of the assets that you have in the cloud environment by using what we call the Cloud Lookup Builder, that's going to enable you to quickly and easily ingest information about the types of assets that you have hosted in your various cloud environments, and then use those as we start to build out the sort of visibility and detection use cases you need to have for those environments. So there's quite a number of different things. I mean, there are probably a couple of highlights from a product perspective that we've done to try and make things a bit easier in that place. So as I mentioned before, something that we've been working on for quite a number of years has been this idea of an app called Splunk Security Essentials, which is really designed to be a collection of use cases supported by some very, very prescriptive guidance. It's designed to help you sort of step through the various different stages you need to have when you're building out an approach and you're trying to improve the assets to ensure that we're able to detect the and detection capability that you have, and really focused on incremental maturity. So we have this idea of the Splunk security modernization journey, which is designed to sort of step you through the various stages of building out your use cases and improving your capability. And really this journey is designed to be done in sort of a phased approach or a staged approach, but also overlaid based upon the types of high priority assets or the high priority systems or the high priority visibility that you need to get around maybe say your cloud environments or your different kinds of data center systems as well, to build out incrementally the type of visibility you need and to build out more advanced use cases to go through expanding the visibility you have with different kinds of data sources and to move through to sort of more advanced use cases in terms of advanced analytics using machine learning and start to look at how we can incorporate automation and orchestration to further streamline the incident response process. So I think one of the things that I've seen, which has been a big shift in this space, is the view of treating a SIEM platform very much like we did with log centralization or log management tools sort of 15, 20 years ago. Many organizations I still speak to are approaching sort of SIEM modernization or SIEM transformation projects in a way where they're looking at, we'll just centralize all of our log data and then we'll try and work out what we need to do after it. Where I think what we need to do is change that approach where we think about it in the context of what are the assets we're trying to protect, what is the visibility we need around those assets to ensure that we're able to detect the threats against those assets in a timely manner, working out what those data sources are, and then incrementally building out our use cases with that kind of approach. And that sort of feeds back into the asset and identity approach that we've sort of talked about throughout the sort of previous slides in the session. So using this sort of security modernization journey, we don't sort of suggest that you should do each stage and then move on to the next stage. What it is more about is actually using this approach to get visibility around specific sort of environments, specific applications, specific assets that you need to protect, and then going and repeating that with the next environment that you need to get visibility around, and sort of taking more of a continual approach to getting security visibility and building out your use cases and your maturity as time goes on. And what we've really designed with Security Essentials is a way that we can give you a whole lot of out-of-the-box use cases, a whole lot of prescriptive guidance that talks about the data sources you need for those use cases to make it really easy for you to start to turn these things on and build the right foundations to implement an approach like risk-based alerting. So I think in terms of some of the things that I just sort of wanted to recap on before I sort of finish up and hand back to Vijay is what is really the right approach for what you should do in terms of trying to mature and improve the effectiveness of your SOC teams and the quality of the alerts that we're giving to those SOC teams that they need to go through and investigate and respond to. So it really needs to be a focus at the start of moving to what do I need to protect? So what is it that I need to protect? Where are my most critical assets? Where is my most critical data? What is the visibility I need around those particular systems? And then building that out and building the detections and the use cases to ensure that you're able to detect the threats against those particular systems first. And that enables us to sort of reprioritize as time goes on because the business is always changing. The types of things we need to get visibility around are going to change. So if we went back to the traditional approach, which was just centralize a whole lot of log data and then work out what was possible, it's a never-ending sort of situation where we're never really going to provide any sort of benefit. But if we can take this risk-based approach, look at the critical systems we need to get visibility around, what the threats are against those systems and build out use cases and mature those use cases in a more incremental way, it enables us to get value and start to be more effective sooner. And I think the other thing to think about in some of the earlier stages is where do the SOC teams spend their most time right now? Because what we want to do is free up resources to start to invest effort into this different approach. And the way we can do that is by looking where SOC teams are spending time now and start to look at approaches like automation to take away some of that repetitive mundane work that the SOC teams are doing to try and free them up to do more value-added functions, which coincidentally is often more interesting work for a human anyway, to spend time to improve the effectiveness of what we're doing as well. And something else that we've been working on, or our security research team at Splunk have been working on, is something we're calling Splunk Attack Range. And Splunk Attack Range is really, if you like, a couple of different ways that we can quickly and easily stand up complete environments consisting of Splunk Enterprise Security, Phantom for security automation, orchestration and response, a whole range of different endpoints, and tools like Atomic Red Team, or maybe you have some other tools that you use to perform sort of attack modeling and attack detection, testing, and refinement activities. So there's an open source project called Splunk Attack Range, which you can grab a copy of, you can clone from GitHub, and then you can start to build out your own sort of implementation of Splunk Attack Range that will enable you to do in sort of a DevOps kind of way, test and build. So when it comes to Splunk, so you're able to get an understanding of the data that's generated when you initiate a certain kind of attack against some of the endpoints that we've included with the Attack Range sample cloud formation scripts that we have. Understand how you would build a detection or what use cases perhaps from Security Essentials you could use to build a detection, and then make sure that that detection is going to work. So very, very handy tool as we move to this approach of working out what are the assets we need to get to, visibility around and protect, and how do we do that. So definitely encourage everyone to have a bit of a look at Splunk Attack Range. So, and I think in terms of if we take a step up a level in terms of some of the other things that we're talking to organisations about. Some of the different kinds of initiatives that organisations are looking at us to help them with, first and foremost around from a security perspective, for example, things like zero trust. Is the whole time that we're working through this process and we're building out the use cases and we're getting the visibility and building our security analytics and detections, the data we are using has tremendous value to other use cases. So if we take, for example, the idea of a zero trust architecture, which is going to involve many, often disparate different technologies that are integrated together to sort of deploy and enforce the ultimate zero trust policy or the end-to-end policy, and authorize users access to different kinds of systems. Just as we get benefit of using that data for security visibility, we also can use that same data to help from an IT operations perspective, for instance, to be able to monitor the health of that end-to-end zero trust architecture. So increasingly, we're seeing sort of beyond the sort of traditional silocation of data between different teams from an IT perspective, we're seeing now a huge benefit of organisations where they're having a centralised approach to be able to use that same data from multiple different use cases across multiple different departments have tremendous value. And I think from a security perspective, the thing I like the most is often IT teams or maybe your DevOps teams or other parts of the business already have access to data that I, from a security perspective, would really love to get access to, but often it's very, very hard. And there's a lot of sort of approvals and complexity in terms of bringing that data into the platform that I use for security. But if we're using the same platform to support all of our different use cases, that data is already going to be there for me to use. So I'm able to get access to it immediately because the IT team has been using it already. It's in the same platform. I can now build out my security use cases on top of that data. So really started to see tremendous benefit of a singular data platform, data analytics approach from the perspective of reuse of data, but also streamlining the speed in which we can get access to data. So I think that's essentially got me to the end of what I was hoping to cover. And now I'll sort of hand back to Vijay to talk about sort of some of the guidance and support that NTT and Splunk can provide in terms of helping our customers to step through this kind of approach.
Yep, that's good. Thanks, James. That was brilliant. That was good. So very quickly, Vijay Chakravarthy, part of the cybersecurity practice in NTT, dealing with various clients, helping them achieve their security/business outcomes. Now, just continuing on from where James left off around use cases, now I would like to spend a minute or two on security set of use cases, but more importantly, how NTT can help our clients unlock the value of the whole SIEM capability. So, talking about the service, Security Operations Center as a service, or SOC as a service, as we call it. What is the service? So, if I were to simply put it, it is improving the overall security posture of your
log data and then
through early detection and investigations and response, while addressing ongoing challenges that you may have around skills shortage, cost blowouts, or technological limitations. This combines the entity's ability to detect cyber attacks,
sort of situation where we're never really
of SIEM capability that James went through earlier in the session. So there's a lot of detail we can go into around this service. But I would like to peel back a few layers just to keep it simple. And this is how the service would look like. The service as a whole can be broken into two halves. The first half, which is on the left-hand side of the screen, deals with our ability to, in providing threat detection, security monitoring, security analytics capability, supported by SOC analysts, monitoring your environment round the clock, 24/7, leveraging threat intelligence or global threat intelligence and advanced analytics. It further provides actionable incident notification with remediation recommendation, but also has got that element of custom playbook, establishing a custom playbook for those of our clients who have specific needs. Now, what I particularly like about this part of the service is the inclusion of our homegrown inbuilt capability called Cyber Threat Sensor, which sits in your network, providing network traffic analysis, just to give us that extra level of coverage we need to make this service as meaningful as we can. So that's the first half. The second half, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, deals with the engineering aspect of the service, which is standard but yet important. Everything to do with managing the platform, watering and feeding, continuous fine-tuning of the policies and rules, health check of the platform incident management, change management, all that lot that you have seen, and I'm sure you would have seen over the years. And all this supported by our SIEM experts. Now, and this is in a nutshell how a SOC as a service looks like. Now, this whole service is supported or underpinned by our cybersecurity advisory consulting services for those of our clients who would either like to start on this journey, on the SIEM SOC capability journey, or already have a SIEM capability or SOC capability in some shape or form, but are looking for an external validation to come in and help them operationalize this. So under this, we've got two specific consulting services. One is the security operations maturity review, where our consultants would come in, take stock of what you have, define the maturity level that you're at, help you define the target state, and plot out the roadmap for you to get from point A to point B. The second service is SOC policy and process design. And this is for those clients who have some SOC capability, where we come in, look at the policies and process that you have, and help standardize and structure the whole SOC process and help you go along this journey. So that's sort of a service. So that's our service capability from a managed service as well as from a consulting service that you can consider. Now, having spoken about the service, we have helped our clients across this country, which I would quickly like to go through in the next slide, if I can, just to give you a sense of how we have gone about delivering this outcome. So the first one is a well-known telecom provider who had a legacy SIEM architecture with a high operational and running cost. So we helped them transition into a next-gen security operations model, and not just that, and not just building the advanced detection and response capability, but we also help establish various integration points with diverse set of controls, including service desk, third-party actions, and all that lot. We also help build the foundation based on a consumption model that they can leverage for their new and future business initiatives. So that's the telecom provider. The second client I would like to quickly talk about is a state electoral commission. This client had some significant concerns about delivering an optimal election day, as you can imagine, and had challenges around resourcing IT operational capability, online presence, and making sure that there's zero incidents on the day. So we helped them establish this capability, the security operations capability, and we helped address the high volume of events, and thereby reducing the resolve and response time, but also providing the visibility, service visibility from end to end. So that's the second client. The third client is a retail enterprise who also had a legacy SIEM solution in place with a low return on investments and lacked extensibility from an integration perspective with a higher running cost. So we undertook a program of work. We delivered security monitoring, ensured high availability, established SOAR, security automation and orchestration capability to make the security operations as efficient as we can, and also established the predictive analytics through data-driven decisions for risks and threats. So I guess that sort of gives you a sense of how we have gone about helping our clients in this country. And if there is one underlying theme across these case studies that I've gone through, it is our ability in leveraging Splunk Cloud and our service capability in achieving this outcome. So now that we've gone through the services, how we have gone about helping our clients, very quickly, I would like to touch on where do we go from here. So we have a workshop offered that you can avail. We call it the Next Gen Security Monitoring Workshop. It's a 2-hour workshop, a combined workshop between Splunk, us, and yourself, where we'll go through various market updates, various solution approaches we have taken and seen with our clients. We'll discuss your requirements, discuss various technical controls, run a demonstration of the product, and also proceed to proof of concept if you wish. So there are a few offers on the table. You've got the services, you've got the workshops. If there's anything that resonates with you, please feel free to reach out to your NTT account manager, and I'm sure we'll be able to discuss that. So with that, I will hand this back to Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Vijay. Thank you, James. Really good insights and information shared today, so thank you very much. We're running a little bit short on time today here, guys, so I'm going to actually thank our audience for the questions you've posed and thank the team for responding to those questions while we've been presenting. Guys, in the time we've got available to us, Vijay and James, let's get you to turn your videos on. James, I might throw you one question that we sort of hear quite often from our clients. You know, in terms of automation, it's a really hot topic. Can we maybe just give us a couple of examples or some thoughts, guidance around, you know, how we can sort of drive better automation through the Splunk platform, the approach we take to architect and operate that in the context of, you know, driving, you know, better productivity, allowing our teams to sort of work more with the business around use cases and apps as opposed to running the platform. How does automation help us and what can we do here?
No, certainly. And I think often automation is sort of positioned as sort of a fairly advanced stage of SOC maturity, but in reality, what we're seeing and what we're helping or trying to help customers to do is to find resource availability by using automation in an earlier stage. And often it's just a case of spending time sitting down with the SOC teams to understand where they're spending most of their time. And it doesn't take too long across the sort of level 1, level 2 sort of analysts to see that there's often a huge number of things that they do on a very heavy manual repetitive basis on a daily perspective. Some of those examples are just keeping, say, for instance, ticketing systems up to date with the status. So there might be different kinds of ticketing systems that every time there's a security alert, you need to update and document and capture what that alert is and what the status, did it get closed, did it get investigated, what was the result, what was the finding. And just the process of keeping ticketing systems up to date, for instance, could be something that an analyst spends 4 hours, 5 hours a day on. There was one particular customer we spoke to where that was pretty much the part-time job of one of their level 1 analysts. But through the use of automation and integration of, say, ticketing systems with Splunk and the other components that the SOC team were using, we're largely able to automate that whole process. So the analysts could just focus their time on the investigation aspects, and the tickets would be largely opened and closed and updated using the automation and integration that we have with our ecosystem partners, be it ServiceNow or some of the other case management solutions that are out there. So I think even without looking at full-blown SOAR automation tools, there's often a number of ways that we can use through sort of the existing APIs or some of the other ecosystem integrations that we have to build out some fairly robust automation that you can use that's going to free up your resources so they can focus on what they should be doing, or maybe focus on more of the transformation type activities in terms of building out sort of better security, more effective security detections and use cases. So I think that's a tremendous way to go and start to find those resources that you need to work on those more value-added steps. So it shouldn't be just discounted as a late stage, high maturity type activity.
Great. Thank you, James. And I think the takeout for me here is that there is a lot of potential, a lot more potential that we can unlock from the platform, but also the approach we take to sort of designing, solutioning, and, actually operating these platforms, and the technology, roadmap that we have in front of us allows us to do much more of that. So I think that's something that both Splunk and NTT would attest to, that we're here to serve our clients in terms of helping to realize those potential. And, please harness leverage the workshop offer that Vijay talked through to allow us to come and have a longer conversation with you about some of the topics we've touched on today. Thank you very much, guys. Great insights, great information, and really appreciate the time today. I'm going to move straight to close, just to say thank you, because we are on time. Again, just urge you to contact all of our attendees and audience watching today or listening to the YouTube broadcast that will be available to you shortly.
The end-to-end policy and all
officer service or the related cybersecurity advisory and consulting services, or hopefully work with us through the workshop offer to sort of understand a little bit more about what we discussed today, and get a broader view of what's available from the platform and the services that we bring to market. Think about the next generation security monitoring workshop as an opportunity to sort of engage with our SMEs in person, online, as needs, to sort of help understand your requirements and look at the right types of solutions for you moving forwards. And obviously, you are very free to ask us to contact you via the evaluation forms that you'll see after this session today. So, in closing, just want to say we hope that we've gained value from the content and information we've shared today. We really look forward to getting your feedback on today's session, and we are actually running a second Tech Friday with Splunk in a few weeks' time that will cover more broadly end-to-end service visibility and performance monitoring for ICT. We'll be doing that in March, so please look out for the invite. I guarantee you it'll be just as valuable, if not more informative than what you've seen here today. Tune into next week's Tech Friday too, where we'll be presenting on how to get started migrating your workloads on Google Cloud's VMware Engine. So, thank you very much once again. Thank you, James. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Splunk and our marketing team, for organising the session today. Thank you to our audience for your time. Wherever you are in the country today, stay safe. Have a great weekend. Thank you and goodbye.